and welcome to the inaugural Global Free Speech Summit hosted by the Future of Free Speech and Vanderbilt University. It is thrilling to see such a vibrant gathering of individuals who are dedicated to free expression joining us both in person and online, where you can watch it as well. For 2 days of talks, panels, debates, documentaries, don't miss out on those, focused sharply on the most pressing free speech issues of our time. The ambitious agenda of this summit is to shed light on the global state of free speech in the 21st century across 3 distinct but overlapping sectors: government, technology, and cultural institutions. Our speakers today join us from 15 different countries on 5 continents, and you'll hear from dissidents who have paid the price for confronting authoritarianism. You'll hear from journalists, writers, human rights experts, and representatives from tech companies. You'll hear stories of censorship and suppression, but you'll also hear stories of resilience and hope. You'll learn about innovative steps to safeguard and reinvigorate the future of free speech. And we hope that the Global Free Speech Summit will serve as a haven for those of us who believe that a resilient global culture of free speech is necessary to serve and function as what Frederick Douglass called the great moral renovator of society and government and the dread of tyrants. Now, I strongly encourage you all to use these 2 days to engage with both the speakers and each other. Seek out relationships and connection with other attendees that might inspire or help you in efforts to foster a civic commitment to the tolerance of dissent, the willingness to listen, and the courage to speak out. And I'm proud to say that today we have people in attendance who have joined us from as far as Australia and New Zealand, so there can be sort of an internal competition between the Kiwis and the Aussies of who may but before we begin today's program, I want to briefly set the scene for why I believe the stakes are so high and the challenges ahead so steep and decisive for the survival of free speech. So behind me, you'll probably recognize what we might call a pantheon of some of history's greatest champions of freedom, democracy, equality, and human dignity. And what these historical figures also share is a deep commitment to both the practice and principle of free speech, which they believed was absolutely essential to realize their ideals. And of course, many of them paid a very high price for speaking truth to power. But there was a time not that long ago when it seemed to be a realistic prospect that their ideals might actually be realized across the globe, because free speech and democracy went hand in hand through the so-called third wave of democratization that brought democracy to all corners of the world. Some good examples are how free speech served as a rallying cry and inspiration for dissidents behind the Iron Curtain, for someone like Václav Havel, the famous Czechoslovakian playwright and dissident, who played such a decisive role in toppling communism. Another iconic figure is that of Nelson Mandela, who spent 26 years in prison under apartheid South Africa. But when he was released, and shortly before becoming president, he gave a speech where he highlighted the central role of free speech, press freedom, in shining a light on the evils of apartheid, of white supremacy, and providing a voice to those who had been silenced by the oppressive apartheid regime. And he also said that no government, no doctrine, no person should have a monopoly on truth, and therefore any restrictions on free speech would be a disservice to society. Free speech optimism culminated in the heady days of the 1990s with the World Wide Web. It was believed at the time that this technology would supercharge freedom of expression and bring freedom and democracy to the remaining pockets of authoritarianism around the world and basically make censorship obsolete. Unfortunately, those golden days of free speech turned out not to last. If we fast forward, we will see that in fact we're living through a global free speech recession. A lot of the gains you can see in this time lapse over a year, the more dark green a country, the stronger protection of free speech, have been rolled back. A lot of the gains that allowed people to criticize their governments, form trade unions, allow them religious freedom, create independent media, have been rolled back by resurgent authoritarianism. And this includes, as we'll hear more about from other speakers, countries like India, the world's largest democracy, Hong Kong, but we also see it in Africa, we see it in Latin America. The free speech recession really is global. So to put some numbers on it, in the past decade alone, more than 6 billion people in close to 80 countries have seen deteriorations in their freedom of expression. The first anti-democratic coup in history happened in 411 BC in ancient Athens. And back then, the authoritarians knew that censorship and suppression was absolutely essential. And that is still lesson number one in the authoritarians' playbook. And so with democracy in retreat, we see that freedom of expression remains the worst affected component of democracy. And last year alone, it worsened in 35 countries around the world. So every budding dictator, authoritarian knows that free speech is the first value and freedom to attack if you want to rule unopposed and without accountability. In order to control the public sphere in the 21st century, you need to control the internet. This liberation technology has been reverse engineered by authoritarians to serve as a tool for high-tech surveillance and censorship at scale. At the same time, we also see that the internet looks very different from the early days where it was much more decentralized. We now have a much more centralized space, which means that a number of companies have a huge impact on the practical exercise of free speech around the world with decision makings that impact what can be said, what can be shared. So governments no longer make all the calls. But the centralization of tech platforms also means that governments can actually lean on these platforms to make them serve as choke points for information they don't like. And we've seen that play out not only in authoritarian states, but also in democracies. We'll hear about Brazil, for instance, that some of you have probably heard about. Concerns about false information have also been weaponized by states, especially during COVID and after the 2016 presidential election in the US. And laws against false information, fake news, have been weaponized by many states as a tool to target and punish journalists who are being imprisoned at much higher rates than a decade ago. But one of the truly concerning things about the global free speech recession is that it also affects the heartland of free speech, the open democracies of the world. So at the Future of Free Speech, last year we published a report where we looked at free speech developments in 22 open democracies across the world. And we looked at laws and policies that affected free speech, and we found that those that restricted free speech far outnumbered those that protected free speech. So we see an increasing tendency for democracies to view free speech as a threat against democracy and not as a bulwark, which is especially fueled, I think, by the digital age that we live in. And we see a mushrooming of laws against hate speech, terrorism, disinformation, and attempts to impose some kind of top-down control of the online space. But there are also positives, and I think that's really important for our gathering today. I very much look forward to for all of you to learn more about Taiwan. Taiwan is a country confronted by Chinese disinformation, attempts to subvert a very successful democracy, which is a thorn in the side of mainland China. But instead of using censorship, Taiwan has resorted to innovative technological ways to foster a resilient civil society that can try and inoculate Taiwanese society against the threats from disinformation. You might have heard a lot about the dangers of AI and disinformation that would be a threat to elections around the world this year. But what has happened so far, and I know that we're 3 weeks away from a very important one, but is that those fears have not been borne out, which suggests that, in fact, democracies are more resilient than a lot of the alarmist messages that we receive from politicians who want to regulate disinformation, misinformation, and so on. So that's a positive thing. A lot of the technology that we fear, AI for instance, can be used for harms, but they can also be used for good. They can actually be used to combat some of the harms that we fear, whether it's debunking disinformation or countering hate speech, for instance. And there are still, in struggling democracies, independent institutions that can serve as a bulwark against overreach by authoritarian governments. And we have resilient civil society organizations, some of them in the room today. For instance, a successful campaign by the Free Speech Union in New Zealand, who did a lot to counter a proposed hate speech law, which was well-intentioned, but was a cure worse than the disease. So all of these examples show that the free speech recession is not inevitable. The free speech recession is something that we can fight, and I very much hope that today all of us here will recommit or will double down our commitment to doing that and choosing the way of those who paved the way for free speech in the first place, the Douglases, the Mandelas, the Roosevelts, and so on. That is the ambitious agenda for us today. But before the party gets started, I would like to do two things. First, I want to thank everyone from the Future of Free Speech and Dialogue Vanderbilt team who have worked very, very hard on putting this together. I've mostly been ordered around by my staff, told what to do, and that I think is a very, very good division of labor. So thanks to everyone. And now it is my distinct pleasure to give the floor to Vanderbilt University's 9th Chancellor, Daniel Diermeier, who has been a steadfast supporter of the future of free speech and instrumental in making Vanderbilt a home where free expression thrives and important conversations can take place. So thank you, Daniel. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Jakob, and good morning, everyone, on this beautiful but a little chilly fall morning. I'm delighted to welcome all of you to the first annual Global Free Speech Summit right here at Vanderbilt. And Vanderbilt is a proud partner with the Future of Free Speech project to host this summit. I want to extend a special word of welcome to our remarkable lineup of guests that will join us today, of course, including Salman Rushdie, Masih Alinejad, Audrey Tang, Nathan Law, David French, James Bennett, Mishi Chaudhry, Rana Ayyub. I'm encouraged to see all of you here today because we are here because we all care about free speech, free expression. We want to be here together and spend some time to better understand it, to also understand how critical it is for our society, and of course, from my point of view, how crucial it is for a university. As you just heard, our exploration is particularly critical in today's digital age. Leaders of tomorrow must understand how to protect and engage in free speech in person, but also online, and amid the still unknown effects and context of artificial intelligence. We're here for the next 2 days to better understand and safeguard that future, and to understand why it is so fundamental for a free society. Divisive debates over what free speech exactly means and what its limits and to what extent these limits are relevant are unfolding in our classrooms, on the floors of Congress, and in other crucial venues across the world. On college campuses, in particular, the limits of free speech have been tested and debated in recent years, culminating in the campus protests that followed the October 7th Hamas attack on Israel and Israel's war in Gaza. These debates are taking place as universities face increasing politicization and pressures to take positions on social and political issues. Here in the United States, but really all across the world, this risks eroding the unique purpose and inestimable value of universities that are the envy of the world. To create an environment that resists politicization and enables a university to serve its essential purpose of providing a transformative education and path-breaking research, we must first create the conditions that support free expression. Here at Vanderbilt, free expression is upheld by 3 pillars: institutional neutrality, open forums, and civil discourse. The first of these is open forums, spaces in which our community can explore and discuss pressing issues without fear of censorship and retribution. Our goal is to provide the broadest possible environment where our students and faculty can freely explore ideas wherever they take them. The second pillar is civil discourse. Here at Vanderbilt, we value people of different viewpoints engaging in constructive conversation and debate. But this debate needs to be guided by a sense of mutual respect, open-mindedness, and a willingness to listen. The third pillar of free expression is the practice of institutional neutrality. The practice of universities and their leaders refraining from taking positions on matters not directly connected to the functioning of the university. There are several important reasons to practice institutional neutrality, but chief among them is the fact that when universities take positions on political matters, they risk chilling debate, dissent, and the open sharing of other perspectives, which is, after all, the lifeblood of what a university is all about. In other words, the proper role of universities is to encourage debates, not to settle them. In recent months, more universities have joined the movement towards widespread practice of institutional neutrality. This is certainly gratifying to see, but there's a lot more that needs to be done. And very importantly, these commitments need to apply to actions and not only to words. But still, I'm happy and I welcome this movement, and I'm encouraged by the growing embrace of this indispensable principle. To encourage debate and civil discourse on our campus, we have launched Dialogue Vanderbilt. Through it, we're not only inviting a range of compelling thinkers to share their ideas and opinions on campus, we're also teaching our first-year students and other members of our university community how to engage in constructive conversations on challenging topics to helpfully restore and strengthen civil discourse on campuses and in society. Today's gathering is a prime example of the powerful dialogue that can occur when the 3 pillars of free expressions are maintained and practiced. Together, guided by our expert panelists, we will explore the current challenges to free speech, threats that can emanate from governance, private technology, and also can affect cultural institutions. So, as you participate in the symposium, I encourage you to consider your own approach to free speech and how it has been critical to your path of discovery and knowledge seeking. I also encourage you to share your perspectives freely so that we may practice the civil and open exchange of ideas that is the lifeblood of what a great university needs to be. At Vanderbilt, we believe that we make the most progress when we convene diverse thinkers to solve and address shared challenges, because no one institution, no one individual can solve our most pressing problems alone. A threat to free speech is always also a threat to discovery, growth, and progress. It will take all of us working together to resist such threats, to protect free expression, so that the leaders of tomorrow's are not stunted or blinkered in their thought and discoveries, so that the notion of a university as an unmatched source of discovery and knowledge, innovation, and human advancement does not become a relic of the past. Thank you all for being here today, and enjoy the summit.